that kind of thing, and then people are going to come to them for that kind of advice.
And also, so with me, you mentioned, I mean, I'm a neuroscientist, but I'm also really I'm a biochemist. So I was on the biochemistry side of neuroscience. I worked with like neurodegenerative diseases and understanding sort of the biological mechanisms that lead to disease, which is a much more concrete side of neuroscience. So I'm not in on the cognitive neuroscience side or even the psychology side, which is a bit more abstract. I'm on the more sort of like sensor side
Right.
of neuroscience, like concrete things like proteins. How do proteins lead to, mechanisms that cause disease type of thing?
So what was your motivation towards getting into that? Was to help people? What was your motivation towards getting into it?
Um, Help people was definitely part of it. And actually, to be honest, one of the things that I really struggled with was, I was, because science is so slow, I felt like the things that I was doing weren't going to help people for many, 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 many years. And that frustrated me a lot. So that was part of it, the helping people, but also just the curiosity piece, like understanding how something works. Because I do have good use of my ME, I'm like kind of intrigued by it, and I like really want to understand how things work. I trust the sensory, but like I really like to understand how things work. So it's curiosity. It was being able to help people, feeling like I was doing something good for the world, and just like it was just like interesting. Biology. I think I'm interested in biology because I get to see the people side.
So
So
you used an interesting word there. You used how. So are you more interested in, what are you more interested in? How or why?
ah oh both. I mean, you need both because um I feel like the how and the why are so intertwined. Understanding how something works is great, and I always like to know how something works. But if you don't understand why it's there, then what's even the point of understanding the how? So it's both. I can't choose between them.
Right. Because I tend to think that, I certainly think that with all of the people with S and T in the
Mm-hmm.
type code that they resemble, there's more of a tendency towards how,
Mm-hmm.
and for them knowledge is know
Yeah.
how to do something practical
Mm-hmm.
to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
um so I'm wondering how much of the things that you're interested in go through the practical filter, and then how much is stuff that's just interesting in itself that doesn't necessarily have a practical application.
See, I feel like, and to me, I think because I'm a sensor, the practical application comes first. I need to know that something is practically applicable, and if it's not, it's like, what's even the point of understanding something? So I feel like the practical aspect is like almost like a baseline, but then the really juicy part, the really interesting part, comes in understanding why something is the way it is, or just sort of exploring something that you don't understand to try to get a bigger picture or to try to understand how it works or why it's there or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think to me the practical aspect comes first, and it's almost like um, it needs to be practical for me to understand it. But then if I just understand the practical, that's boring and stupid and useless.
Right.
You know?
Interesting. Well, that lines up. That's consistent.
Yeah.
That's why I want to get at the motivations
Yeah.
of it. Because there is going to be a tendency towards. Do you think that certain people ask why questions, and then you're thinking, why are you interested in something?
Yes.
Why?
Why are you asking the why? What's the
Yeah,
point of it? Yes.
because I was thinking about. I once heard a neighbor, and they had a little kid was like asking these all these why questions,
Yeah.
and I initially thought that the reply was quite witty when he says, "Why do you keep asking so many questions?"
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, So actually, a really good example of this. So you had, sent me a message via Facebook, and sent me a link and asked me for
Yeah.
feedback and things. And I think the first thing I asked you when we got on the phone was, okay, what is your goal? What are you trying to get out of this? Why are you doing this? What's your end goal? Like, what's our direction that we're going in? And then once I figured out, the direction and what you're trying to get at, then it's like, okay, cool. Now we can like jump in and talk about abstract concepts and whatever, as long as I get
Right.
what the goal is and what the practical application of this is.
Thing is, though, for me, is like the goals are sort of multiple. So I thought, well, I could try this, you could do that, or well, you could do this event with Dario Nardi. It's like there's lots of because I was thinking, what is the most interesting thing to her?
Yeah.
Um, um, so, but then I was thinking, but just in that aspect of, in case there are any parents watching this or anyone who's thinking of becoming a parent, if you have got a child that keeps asking why questions, it's good that they're asking the why questions. So try to answer them. or at least to get, or at least ask them to think about it, like to get them towards the answer themselves rather than just telling them. So it's like, oh, why is this? Well, what am I doing? You know what I mean? To get them, because you don't want to like shut them down every time they ask a why question, because you want them to develop their minds. And because at that age, there's so much that a child doesn't understand, say a young child, very young child. If you get to a situation where they learn not to ask any questions, but that might be like a bias of me or like an abstract types, where it's like, they might go, no, you're being a bad parent. You must answer their questions. You want to encourage their curiosity. But I've digressed a bit, sorry. But so that's interesting. You relate. So, because I was thinking, because OP is a little bit weird in my book, I think, could she be an ENFJ? So I just wanted to check things out. So here's an interesting one.